This is Bam Electric Ghost, and tonight we're interviewing the artist behind Handprintpledge.org, which is an auction for Black Lives Matter. So we're going to be interviewing contemporary artist Michelle Volz. We're going to discuss her piece, Handprint Pledge, which is at Handprint Pledge on Instagram. And this is an auction for Black Lives Matter. And she's doing a Handprintpledge.org auction for Black Lives Matter. We interview indie artists from around the world, and we're going to be talking to her tonight. You're a contemporary artist, and you do have this Handprint Pledge auction going on for Black Lives Matter since yesterday, right?
Yes, it started at noon yesterday.
And so you're from Utah. You're a contemporary artist. You paint landscapes. Says you're a texture junkie, and you like to use more tactile art experiences. Can you maybe talk about the genesis of create this piece for Black Lives Matter?
Yeah, it was just a really weird thing. My art, and ever since Memorial Day, when the protests started, I had been talking to my girls about racism and all of that, and so the conversation of race and equality was heavy on my mind. And I was awake at 4 a.m. and last week, one day, with a toothache, oddly enough. And so I was just thinking about these things in the middle of the night, and they just happened to collide somehow. And this idea was born. So I don't know, I just kind of, an image popped into my head, and I thought, hey, that would be a really great idea. I've just felt a little bit helpless, as a white suburban mom out here in Utah, trying to figure out how to keep the conversation, how to, create, how to be a part of it, I guess, and how to make a difference.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people are feeling that way. We can go to protests and things, but I wanted something that could live that. And art for me is a way to do that. So it just kind of worked out that way.
That's interesting. So where did you actually have this done? How did people participate in creating the art? Where did you actually have people, do the handprints?
Yeah. So I did it here with my family first, and then I took it out last Friday up to the Utah State Capitol Hill. There was a protest there going on that evening, and people really jumped on board. They really liked the idea and wanted to participate. They liked the idea, these on this black canvas together would create a visual of community and unity and hope in regards to this conversation. And so people would just kind of come over, and I would paint their hand as close to the color of their skin as I could get it. And they would place their hand on the black canvas. And so there's just this beautiful colors of skin coming together on this canvas as we all kind of pledge to stand up and not be silent any longer on the issues of race, and just continue to have this conversation. And most importantly, I think, to listen,
Yeah, I think it's great because I'm a musician, and musicians, I've been writing songs that are what I call political electronic music. I'm a synthesist. I'm an electronic musician.
Right.
And for many years, I've been writing music, and music has been a way that I've, jumped on different causes and, donated songs, because that's, I'm a songwriter.
Awesome.
So I understand from an artist point of view, it's really interesting. I have talked to some artists before on the program, maybe only 2 or 3, mostly musicians, but I do understand the feeling to try to participate. And just a question in terms of you're a texture artist, you're a contemporary artist. Who are your primary influences?
I have to say Monet. As far as some of the old school ones go, Monet is definitely one. I got to see a couple of his in person, and of color, like if you stand really close, it doesn't look like anything, but if you stand back,
you have to
all of that color kind of comes together to create a picture. And I've always loved that. Contemporary artists, like for right now, I love Jennifer Rains. She's amazing. Her use of color is just incredible. Those are probably two of my faves.
Oh, yeah. How long have you been doing art as a professional artist?
You want to know something funny? Is I was a musician for most of my life. I sang jazz and played the piano and did all of that. And then I got married. I worked in marketing for a little bit. So I had a career. I got married, and I just started painting one day. It was maybe 5.5 years ago that I started painting, and I had a funky dream where I was painting in my dream, and I was like, oh, that might be fun to try. So, because I had this really vivid dream, I could see this particular painting in my head, and I was like, I wonder if I could try and actually paint that. And I really don't have any experience painting at that point. So I gave it a try, and I got I just loved it, and I started to get really excited about learning the textures and techniques and how to mix paint and all of that stuff. And so it just kind of evolved, and here I am, and I do commissions, and it's my livelihood.
Wow. So did you actually go get trained at an art school, or did you just get under somebody's wing? How did you learn about the techniques? Or did you just self-taught?
I'm self-taught mostly. I consider myself a graduate of the University of YouTube when it comes to learning techniques. If I had a question about doing certain techniques, I would just do my best to look up on YouTube how other artists were doing things, and how do I do this, or how do I create that look and that texture and all of that. And it's kind of culminated to what I do today. So
that's interesting, because a lot of the indie musicians, I primarily interview indie musicians, and a lot of them kind of like, or some of them are self-taught, some of them went to school, but all of them had the passion to do art. And they just, went into music. Just like when I've talked to actors, some people just find they have a talent for the arts, and it drives them into, graphic arts or music or theater or modeling or any kind of thing. But it's just interesting when people find, and you had been a musician, so you found another form. I do find that musicians tend to have multiple capabilities. I've talked to musicians that became actors that became musicians, musicians that do artwork, that are heavily involved in the arts and visual arts and graphic arts. So it's interesting. It's kind of dynamic. I think just being an artist or a creative seems to draw that kind of skill set.
Right. And as a musician, I was classically trained initially. And so, when I would sing other people's jazz songs, I didn't really write anything myself, which for me was it was lacking. I loved music, but I couldn't create in that outlet for myself. So I love that you can create, because that I think that's awesome. It's an incredible skill to have in that medium. So when I found art, I think I connected to the ability to be able to create something that's my own, that seemed to come a little trying to write songs for me. So yeah, I think when it comes to creativity and art and music and theater and acting, it's really just about finding, your own outlet, your own emotional outlet.
Yeah, I find that people have I had a kind of a liberal arts background. I went to a school in Maine called Bowdoin College, which kind of a storied, New England small college. And it just, what we found is like this holistic thinking, where you could take like a concept of like Nietzsche or heavy philosophy or reading like Wordsworth. And I just found that, by mixing like Victorian poetry with classical music or electronic music, you could do cross genre or cross artistic capabilities and put it into music. And I think that's what a lot of the people I interview have, multiple talents, but then they find one that really stands out, and then that they become a creative person in that field. And it's interesting. Your story is not unlike a lot of the musicians I talked to.
Yeah.
because you are a musician, so that's interesting. Um, so it's really cool. I want to just tag your website is
Yes.
www.volzart.com, and you have the handprintpledge.org, which we're going to include all those website links, and we have been pushing on our Instagram and our other web pages as the Ghost, and we're just happy to be able to support something for this cause because we created a genre of music we call political electronic music back in 2016, where we kind of started to take on that EDM didn't just have to be about beats
Yeah.
and dancing, that it could be about other things, and that's what kind of spawned this podcast, where I decided I should give a voice to all the indie musicians out there. And if we've branched into talking to artists and musicians and actors and businesses, it kind of branched out a lot wider than what we thought.
That's awesome. I love this. Is a niche that I think has not been, so you're kind of a forerunner here.
What's interesting, Anchor FM was its own company, and then Spotify actually made it we're part of Spotify now.
Oh, wow.
And so it's just gotten bigger and bigger. We've got over 23,000 listeners worldwide, and our audience actually reaches to almost every country on the planet.
That's amazing.
And it just, and I've talked to bands in Norway, Australia, Japan, Berlin. I just don't talk to U.S. based artists. I've been able to talk to artists all over the planet.
That's fantastic.
Even in Russia.
Well, this is an issue that
yeah.
we're seeing all over the planet right now. I mean, France, Australia, and the UK. There's all kinds of places all over the world that are having protests right now for Black Lives Matter. This is a universal conversation that is happening at this moment. It's awesome.
Well, yeah, it just seems like, sometimes in the civil rights movement, I took some civil rights classes when I went to Bowdoin, and you had, the big moments in history, the Birmingham bombing of the church with the 4 little girls. You had, Emmett Pettus Bridge. You had, Rosa Parks. You had Emmett Till. It always was like these very significant moments that the, people in the movement, in the NAACP and SNCC, they found these cases that were like beyond a doubt that this isn't just. So the whole thing with Floyd George is kind of like the new Emmett Till, the new Birmingham bombing. It's something that was clearly not something that you could say, well, maybe the person, it tends to be in this kind of vein as people say, oh, the person, maybe they did something, but it was pretty clear that it wasn't. So then the movement has gotten a lot of strength because of the sacrifice of Floyd George and the tragedy of Floyd George. And I'm glad that I see people all over the world, not just in the U.S. And you're in Utah, so that you were moved by it, and under a lockdown, you went out and you and I think that's really exciting for the future of the whole planet.
I agree. And eventually the protests will fade and things like that. But what I wanted to do with this art piece was to create something where we could look back on this and remember the conversation that happened. So I created 2 of these pieces. There was a larger one and a smaller sister one, and the larger one I state of Utah in hopes that our leaders will put it where they can see it and remember this conversation, not forget too soon.
Would you try to put it in the state house somewhere in the state capital?
I hope so.
Do you have a place you want it to go?
I hope so. I would love for them to put it somewhere, whether it's the courthouse or the Capitol, or even if it's their police station, somewhere where it can be of use, so that when they see it, they can they can remember this period in time, this historic conversation that we're having. Forget to include that conversation and our community that they serve in as they lead us, I suppose.
That's really good. I like to see people doing action. I've always believed in that. Myself. So I wanted to be able to jump on this, and anybody that's doing these similar types of efforts can get in contact with the Ghost, because we're always about moving things forward. But we're very happy to have you on the program, and we're out to our 11 platforms. And we're lucky to be able to actually even connect the hyperlinks to our podcast. So we're going to probably use the picture of your print that we have that you sent us as the main
Great.
cover. And then we'll have the hyperlink to your Instagram, and to the actual site, which is handprintpledge.org.
Right.
And then have your direct Instagram post as well. So we can have multiple links on these. And this will go out, as I said, we're part of Spotify. It'll be going on Spotify podcasts, which are free to everyone who wants to hear a podcast. You don't have to actually be a subscriber to listen on Spotify. People might not know that, but you don't.
Mm-hmm.
And it'll be on 10 other platforms, including Apple and Google Play, Radio Public, Overcast, many, many more. So
Awesome.
it'll get pushed out later tonight, within probably like an hour. It'll be available. We'll send you the links, and everything's free. It's just, the podcast is just going to be out. We will be able to link it to our Instagram, and you should be able to link it to yours. And it allows you to have a hyperlink with a highlight that will actually go to the Spotify version of the podcast if people click on it. Yeah, so that will be set up on our site, and then from there, you can figure out how to do your own version of it. But it will be on all of our Instagram sites as well.
Wonderful.
So we're happy to help, and we love that you do this social action for this movement, and we're very excited that America's moving forward with this. And Michelle, we're happy that you came on the program. We're going to push this out and get it to everybody within the hour.
Wonderful. Sounds good. The auction tonight at midnight. So keep up the bidding, and thanks so much for taking the time and having me on the show today.
Well, no problem. Thank you very much.
Yep. We'll talk to you later.
Okay, bye.
Bye.